Okay, let's dive right into it. How exactly does one guy build a staggering $150 billion empire entirely on pure logic, only to watch the whole thing unravel because he completely forgot that humans aren't, well, spreadsheets? Today, we're unpacking the rise and fall of Ray Dalio and Bridgewater Associates. It's a truly fascinating story about the allure of systems. I mean, we all love systems, right? They promise certainty in a totally uncertain world. And for decades, Dalio's system was seen as the absolute holy grail of Wall Street. But as you'll see in this explainer, the very obsession that built this massive money-making machine is exactly what caused it to break down.
You see, this obsession actually started with a pretty profound humiliation. Let's rewind to 1982. A young Ray Dalio goes on national television and confidently, proudly predicts a severe economic collapse. He says it with absolute certainty. And he was historically, spectacularly wrong. Actually, the recession ended the exact same month he made his call, kicking off an incredible 18-year bull market. This disastrous prediction completely wiped him out. He had to fire his entire staff. He had to borrow $4,000 from his dad just to put food on the table. It was rock bottom. But from that total failure, he made a vow. He promised himself he would build a mechanical system that would never, ever let him trust his own gut again. But, and here's the wild part, out of that absolute rock bottom failure, he constructed an automated trading machine that eventually managed a staggering $160 billion at its peak. I mean, just think about that number. He went from a tiny two-man consultancy operating out of a brownstone apartment to running literally the largest hedge fund on the entire planet. Pension funds, huge endowments, sovereign wealth funds, they all just poured their money into Bridgewater.
So, the crucial point we really need to unpack today is exactly how this revolutionary machine worked, and more importantly, why its total obsession with cold, hard rules ultimately broke it. Because to understand the failure, we first have to appreciate the sheer genius of the foundational system. I mean, how do you actually take human emotion out of investing? How do you systemize risk itself?
To wrap our heads around the genius of this machine, we actually have to talk about Chicken McNuggets. Seriously. Back in 1980, McDonald's wanted to launch the McNugget, but chicken prices were way too volatile to guarantee a fixed menu price. Dalio looked at this and realized, okay, you can't hedge a whole chicken on the futures market, but a chicken isn't really just a chicken. A chicken is essentially just the cost of corn, plus the cost of soy meal, plus a predictable profit margin for the farmer. By hedging the corn and the soy meal separately, he completely locked in the price. The risk didn't just vanish, it was carved up into tiny, measurable little pieces. This single idea, decomposing risk, became the absolute engine of Bridgewater.
And this brilliantly illustrates what became this fascinating profit versus the machine dynamic. Dalio took insights like the McNugget deal and packaged them into highly mechanical if-then rules. Stuff like, if interest rates drop in a country, its currency will depreciate, so short the currency. He specifically designed this system to ignore his own emotional ego. He wanted the human element completely gone. The system was disciplined, right? It rebalanced without an ounce of emotion. And for a really long time, the gap between what Dalio personally thought and what the machine actually did was the secret sauce to their incredible success.
Just look at the 90s. Dalio was constantly predicting doom. He called a bear market in 94, warned of a blow-off top in 95, and literally declared bombs away in 97. But the economy just kept expanding every single time. And what did his automated pure alpha fund do? It simply ignored him. It followed the data, stuck to the rules, and quietly made money almost every single calendar year. So you've got the most famous predictor in finance running a fund that succeeded precisely by ignoring his own predictions. But then, 2008 happens. The big crash finally validated his decades of doomsday prepping. The automated system was positioned defensively, sure, but Dalio didn't think it was aggressive enough. So what does he do? He overrides his defensive system. The prophet snatches the wheel back from the machine, bets incredibly hard, and while the average hedge fund lost about 18%, Bridgewater finished way up. Dalio personally walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars. But this massive victory planted a really, really dangerous seed. He became completely convinced that he possessed a universal key to how everything in the world works.
And that supreme confidence led him to basically turn his algorithm onto his own employees. He created this incredibly rigid religion of principles that treated humans exactly like commodity inputs. He called it radical transparency. Every single meeting was recorded. Colleagues had to rate each other on dozens of personality traits in real time, right there on company iPods. And all the ratings were public. absolutely nothing was private. He genuinely believed that human nature could be cracked the exact same way he cracked commodity pricing. To him, markets and people were literally the exact same problem, just inputs and outputs.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable but absolutely fascinating question for our explainer today. What actually happens when you try to systemize the human soul? What happens when you try to strip all the nuance, emotion, and empathy from a workplace and just replace it with rigid, recorded data points?
Well, you get situations like the truly tragic story of executive Katina Stefanova, which really highlights the devastating human cost of this system. During a recorded meeting, Dalio relentlessly berated her in front of 10 other executives. He attacked her judgment, her composure, just kept pushing until she broke down crying. What he didn't know at the time was that she was secretly pregnant. But what followed was honestly even worse. Dalio had the tape heavily edited to make himself look like this calm, wise mentor. He retitled it Pain plus Reflection equals Progress and literally made it mandatory viewing for all employees. They even used it as a personality test for job candidates. This horrifying emotional breakdown was repackaged as corporate training, proving that the human system was working exactly as Dalio designed it, to aggressively weed out what he saw as emotional weakness.
Now, while this culture is completely corroding on the inside, the actual financial machine itself starts stalling out. For 7 out of 11 years in the 2010s, their flagship Pure Alpha fund severely underperformed a basic S&P index fund. Let that sink in. You would have literally been better off just putting your money in a simple index fund and going to the beach. Because while Dalio was intensely distracted, pouring all his energy into recording meetings and promoting his status as a management guru, the core trading algorithm that made the firm famous in the first place was being completely neglected. And as financial investigators started poking around this mysterious underperformance, the secret reality they uncovered was kind of shocking. This world-famous machine, it wasn't some incredibly complex, evolving AI. It was basically an outdated spreadsheet of simple if-then rules. What had been super revolutionary in the 90s was just straight-up obsolete by the 2010s. The firm had essentially transformed into a giant marketing operation for Dalio's management philosophy, while the actual trading system was just left there to decay. The final nail in the coffin, though, that came when this massive algorithm completely, totally missed the 2020 pandemic crash. Think about it. Dalio spent 40 years predicting catastrophe. He had legendary, deep ties to the Chinese government. If anyone on Wall Street was going to spot the warning signs coming out of Wuhan, it should have been him. But instead, he publicly called the impact exaggerated, and the fund ended up tumbling around 21% by mid-March. The one massive global crisis that would have perfectly validated his entire brand, he missed entirely. The machine just couldn't predict a true black swan event. And look at the sheer executive body count here. This rigid system just chewed up and spit out some of the absolute greatest executive talent on the planet. Britt Harris, gone in 5 months. John Rubinstein, the guy who engineered the iPod, left after 10 months and straight up called the place a cult. Larry Culp, who ran Danaher brilliantly for 14 years, was fired on the spot. It became painfully clear that this system wasn't actually designed to produce a successor. It was designed to constantly prove that the machine, and by extension Dalio himself, was completely irreplaceable. Eventually, we get to late 2022. After more than a decade of false starts, Dalio finally actually steps away, and the new leadership immediately takes a sledgehammer to the cult of personality. The surveillance tapes are completely destroyed. The mandatory principal tests, scrapped. The entire culture of recorded humiliation is dismantled. For the first time in years, the employees are just allowed to do their jobs with an iPad rating hanging over their heads. And you know what? The mental health of the firm finally begins to recover. And here is the truly astonishing part. Almost immediately, without Dalio's ego and constant pressure looming over everyone, the supposedly broken Pure Alpha fund surged 18%, right in the middle of a global bear market. In the fall of 2022, while stocks and bonds were cratering everywhere else, the firm's new investment committee, working without Dalio breathing down their necks, turned the whole fund around in a single year. Turns out, when you just let professionals do their jobs without constant public humiliation, performance actually improves. Crazy, right? So we really have to wrap up this explainer by asking one big provocative question. Does the obsessive drive to systemize everything, especially the human soul, actually destroy the very thing that makes the system work in the first place? Ray Dalio built an absolute empire by decomposing risk, but his fatal flaw was believing he could decompose human beings. The system ultimately failed because it forgot that a company isn't just a set of rules and data points, it's the actual people operating it.
When you strip away their dignity, the machine just grinds to a halt. It's a deeply fascinating warning for all of us about the limits of cold logic in a very human world. What do you think? I hope this breakdown helped clarify the whole complex rise and fall of Bridgewater. Until next time, keep questioning the systems around you.